Well, the Pixar ranking video inevitably brought me here. Dreamworks, what a company. The big rival. Dreamworks always had a more dodgy track record compared to Pixar, to say the least, but when they get a film right, they really get it right. You have to remember, this is a full-grown adult ranking films aimed for kids, so I may come across as harsh in this video, but I believe the best kids films also appeal to adults.
It was a G.I. Jane jump.
Wow, this is fucking rough. Shark Tale is one of the worst animated films of all time, and one of the worst films ever made. I'm not joking. When you consider the budget and the stars behind it, Dreamworks should be fucking ashamed of themselves. The fact that the Academy nominated this film for an Oscar is genuinely sickening. What does this movie actually have going for it? You have a terrible story, awful jokes, unbelievably unlikable characters, and crazy bad animation, especially considering Shrek 2 came out the same year. This movie monumentally failed on every metric. It's seriously that bad in my opinion. Screw this film. I never want to see it again.
Bazinga!
The plot is Chicken Little. I'm not kidding. The villain is the exact same. His motivations are the exact same. What the fuck? What did DreamWorks expect when they tried to copy one of the worst Disney films of all time? Who thought a Sheldon and Rihanna movie would be good? This movie is just so annoying. The modern hip soundtrack is just so unfitting, and they're obviously just trying to cram in all these Rihanna songs just because she's in the movie, but it just doesn't fit at all. This whole movie was just such a slog to get through. It's absolutely awful shit.
45.
I mean, come on, DreamWorks. What is this shit? You're DreamWorks. Why are you making a shitty horse movie for babies? At least anyone can enjoy the first Spirit movie. Why go baby mode on the sequel? Why is the animation so lackluster? Why is Jake Gyllenhaal in this? Why is Walt Goggins in this? I have so many questions. It's a movie where they didn't even put effort into it. At least with the Troll films, which are also baby movies, they still sort of try to entertain the adults too. Imagine if you had to take your kid to see this shit. It's completely inoffensive, safe trash. Why is it even a Spirit sequel? It has nothing to do with the first one.
44.
This is genuinely one of the worst animated films I've ever seen. I could see a Penguins film being half decent too, but no, this is one of the most boring animated films I've ever watched. There is nothing to this film, absolutely nothing. It feels like there's no plot to it. It's almost like I'm watching a TikTok compilation or some shit. Nothing made me laugh, nothing stood out, and I was just begging for it to end. The new characters are also horrendous, so one note and full of nothing. The whole movie is just nothing. Terrible movie.
Abominable!
Abominable? More like abomination? This movie is horrendous. It's like a low-tier Blue Sky movie. What on earth was this? It was just like How to Train Your Dragon again, but shit. And the villain was just Charles Muntz from Up. They are just way too similar, man. And he's voiced by fucking Eddie Izzard again. Eddie, just leave me alone, please.
Who put that bar there?
This whole movie is just so bland. And the animation is alright, but nothing special. The art style does make me want to be a bit sick, however. The plot and the characters are just so lame, man. This feels like one of those AI movies. All the side characters are shit as well. We have popular jock who's addicted to his phone. And the fat one. He likes food. Did he mention that he likes food? What a very interesting character trait. It's so riveting and nuanced. Also, his voice is one of the most annoying voices I've ever heard in the history of cinema.
Hey, Nai, wanna shoot some hoops?
Out of all the films I've seen, he could be the most annoying. It's almost as if he was going through puberty and they had to pitch shift his voice. What an utter disaster. It's not quite the worst, although it is close, but this is my most hated DreamWorks movie. I hated every single second of this. It's utter crap.
42.
Turbo is shockingly bad, but you guys all knew that. I don't know why DreamWorks would try and copy the Cars franchise, and then make the main character a snail on top of that. It's just so dumb. The whole movie is dumb. For a 2013 animated film, it looks like garbage. The original Incredibles looks better than this. The colouring of this movie is just so dull and grey, and it was probably to mask out some of the shitty animation and character designs. The characters are just so ugly to look at, and they're all so forgettable. The Paul Giamatti snail is honestly such a dickhead for no reason, and he's so unlikable in this, holy shit. The villain is also horrendous, one of the worst I've ever seen to be honest. What the fuck, man? Fuck this movie.
Let's just say I'm the boss.
Spirit is in this movie, and only like one person was watching it in the cinema. Guys, that's your own movie. What are you doing? Great job on selling your other films. Boss Baby Family Business was so hard to get through, especially considering the fact that this is the longest Dreamworks movie. Why out of all their films is the Boss Baby the longest one? It's so dumb. And there is a lot of Dreamworks flair in this one, and not in a good way. Many of the characters are creepy and downright disturbing, to be honest. Some of these character designs are terrifying. It's fucking disgusting. The plot is getting the Boss Baby back from retirement. Great sequel idea, guys. Haven't seen that one before. And retconning past characters always works out great. It's almost like they shouldn't have even made this. I can't deal with this movie, man. This is one of the worst ideas for a franchise of all time. And they reference the Shawshank Redemption in this. My favourite movie of all time is referenced in this film. Thanks for that, Dreamworks.
Anyone can cook.
My god, this movie sucks. Controversial take, I know, but it's awful. It's got some of the worst pacing I've ever seen in an animated movie. I literally couldn't process what was going on. And what doesn't help is the awful characters, awful cliches, and somehow a more annoying version of the minions. My god, I hate those slugs. How could you make minions but more annoying, Dreamworks? The animation isn't good either, as it's CGI instead of stop motion. Nothing made me laugh and nothing stood out. It's completely tone deaf and crap. Ratatouille is on top here. If this wasn't connected to Dreamworks or Aardman, I'm sure that people wouldn't like it as much. This is worthy of a first class junk video, but then again that means I'll have to watch this shit again.
39.
Is it even fair to include this movie? It's just a low budget direct-to-video Dreamworks movie. Of course it's bottom tier Dreamworks. It just seems unfair as it's on a much lower scale compared to the other films. Joseph King of Dreams includes some really shit animation, and to be honest some really awful performances. Ben Affleck is atrocious in this film, and I mean atrocious. It really does seem to me that this was a cash grab for him. And Mark Hamill gets given absolutely no material, so he's absolutely wasted in this film. What a real shame. The dialogue in general is awful too, so it just makes the weak performances even worse. Some of the animation is alright, like the dream sequences, and these flowers actually look quite good to be fair, but it's bogged down in the frame for some shit CGI and bad character designs.
Normal words, but a horse guy.
Spirit is such a terrible animated film. Apart from the animation sometimes looking good, there is nothing here. The choice for the characters not to speak is interesting, but the horses are not even fleshed out enough for me to care about them. I could literally not care less about this movie. It was so boring. The CGI blending in this is awful too, with having PlayStation 2 character models in the background. I'm sure all of this stuff looked fine when it was released on 35mm in cinemas, but it's aged like milk to be honest. It's kind of ironic how the only thing that holds up really is the 2D animation. And also all the songs in this are baffling to be honest. To include these soft rock songs in a film about horses with next to no dialogue is a very jarring choice to say the least. And Matt Damon occasionally voices the thoughts of the main horse.
That was the moment I understood. They were headed to my homeland, and I had to stop them.
He shows up so infrequently that it's weird when you do hear him. And to be fair, he's trying more than his friend Ben Affleck in Joseph King of Dreams, but not by much. This one really didn't work for me, guys. I'm sorry if you think I'm being too harsh, but this did next to nothing for me. El Dorado. Fuck this movie. This boring ass movie. Why do people like it so much? This is torture. I have a special hatred for this film, as the first time I watched it I was super tired all day. I had a great idea to watch a Dreamworks film, in hopes of keeping me awake. That didn't work at all. The Road to El Dorado seems to be a movie that people want to like, but deep down don't. I mean, I was really rooting for it. But before you shoot me, let me explain why I don't like it. I think the nostalgia critic actually puts it best with the animation. It is good, apart from the CGI animation. Wow, it looks terrible. But he says how it's too detailed and realistic at times, which is so true. It's not zany enough with over-the-top reactions, so the humour isn't fully realised. I also think in general the humour is incredibly stale. I must be one of the only people on earth who thinks the humour just feels a bit off. The stuff they say is just very surface level, and I've heard it all before. Some lines could work, but the delivery on them just isn't right. The only funny moment in the whole film is at the end with the horse, which is some funny understated humour. The pacing on this movie is insanely bad as well. I mean insanely bad. When they get washed up on shore it's just so boring, and I really clock off through most of this movie to be honest. The music is alright on the whole, but none of it really stands out. Well, apart from It's Tough to Be a God of course, and that sequence is pretty good to be fair. I'm sorry guys, but the critics were right with this one, even the nostalgic one. The stark difference between this and Shrek that got released a year later is crazy. There's a reason why one became a household name.
Let's just say, I'm the boss.
This is the ultimate Dreamworks idea. The boss baby. No other studio would have made this. Jesus Christ. This movie is horrendously stupid. Almost as much as Turbo. Alec Baldwin said that this was his favourite ever role.
This is my Citizen Kane. This is my Lawrence of Arabia.
I think that says a lot. For me, this film gets progressively worse. Like the second half shit with the villain and the nanny is just baffling. I do see where they were trying to go with this one with the kids' imagination. And I do like the soundtrack to be fair. But overall this just feels like a passionless cash grab. And I never want to see it again.
35.
Yeah, they really should have stopped after the second one. Shrek the Third is basically a 25-minute special stretched out into an hour and a half of crap. They were desperate to get a smidge of the magic of the first two, but they failed. The start of this movie isn't the worst, apart from it being very tonally weird, but the movie really starts to suck when they get on the ship. The pacing completely fucking dies and never picks up. That's because there is no actual stakes in this movie, or at least you don't care about them. Prince Charming is the villain again and it's so boring to see. Like, go home mate, you already lost. No one wants to see you anymore. Did Dreamworks not realise that he only worked well because of the contrast to his mum? And the old side characters have nothing funny to say at all. And the only thing I remember is the Dada bit, which will probably haunt my dreams. All these factors add up to a crushingly boring watch, and this movie feels like it's never going to fucking end. Terrible film. Fuck Shrek the Third. I never want to see this movie ever again.
34.
I've spoke about this movie twice already, so again I'll keep this one a bit short. But Ruby Gillman is a very inoffensive, safe animated film that offers absolutely nothing new. It steals jokes from Shrek and Megamind, which is very weird because it means Dreamworks is stealing from themselves. I could see what they were trying to do with this one with the Little Mermaid parody, which I guess is a bit similar to the Shrek humour, but the actual plot is so predictable and dumb that it makes it not a fun watch at all. The character designs in this are awful as well. What in the world is this shit?
33.
To be honest, in memory, I thought Antz was so much better than it actually was. I thought it was on the same level as A Bug's Life. But no, fair play Pixar, you easily win this round. I think the biggest reason on why this film doesn't work is because it was rushed to compete with A Bug's Life. I'm not going to bore you with the long backstory, but the founder of Dreamworks, Jeffrey Katzenberg, left Disney in bad terms to create a rival company, and it's been heavily inferred that Katzenberg stole the idea for an Ant movie, but I don't really know to be honest. And at the end of the day, this film isn't good. The blaring issue with this film, and the main issue really, is the script. It's dog shit. It's a bit worrying when 3 people wrote this movie. It seems like the script is a first draft and really rushed. And the amount of cliches in this movie makes me think a robot wrote it. You have a generic wisecracking main character, the boring hard general with secret evil intentions, 2 unlikely lovers thrusted into wacky situations, an arranged marriage where it doesn't work out. I'm sorry if you think I'm being harsh, but I've seen this shit a million times before. And the amount of exposition in this story is just lazy. It just seems again like they were trying to quickly get this film out. And it's like the movie is very tonally confused. It's trying to be quite adult, but it doesn't quite work when there is so much baby humour. The animation for its time looks decent, so I have to give it some slack considering how old it is. To be fair though, the soundtrack is amazing. It's really good.
I call it a grug. Rhymes with grug.
I don't even know what to say with this one. The Croods is just such a nothing movie. It's very generic and the caveman shit gets so boring. It's just another fish out of water story. Nothing really made me laugh in this at all. But to be fair, nothing was incredibly bad in this. It's just so bland that the movie's already been wiped from my memory. Guys, what do I even say about this one? Holy shit. B-movie is batshit insane. It could be the most fucked up Dreamworks film. I do respect the film in the way that I had no idea where it was going. But man, this film just gets crazier and crazier. Somehow Seinfeld managed to get $150 million for B-movie. What the fuck? I mean, they don't have much to show for it, as the movie doesn't look that great. It does look better than Over the Hedge, but that had like half the budget. The film fails on a lot of levels, but at least it's funny. How intentionally funny it was is anyone's guess, but there are several laugh out moments. I think the film's main issue was its tone. It should have been more crazy for the whole runtime, because I literally do not give a shit about these characters. The courtroom scenes are just unbelievable to watch, and only Dreamworks could have thought of that shit. And Ken is really funny, of course. How could people tell what was going to be the better movie at the time? Both B-movie and Kung Fu Panda have awful names, but the quality difference is insane. I don't really think it's a good film, but you know, it sure is entertaining. I'd rather watch this again than a lot on this list.
Singing killed my grandma, okay?
This one is kind of hard to rate. Trolls isn't as offensively bad as something like Shark Tale, because at least this one seems to be aimed at literal babies. This is a baby movie. I just feel bad for all the parents who had to take their kids to watch this. It's fine on a technical standpoint, and again, I can see why kids love this, but it's just not for me. However, I still didn't like the plot or the butchering of all the popular songs. And singing Kill My Grandma could be the single most stupid line I've ever heard. It never fails to make me laugh.
Singing Kill My Grandma, okay?
This movie was so forgettable that I forgot to initially review it. Oops. Well, this is going from my memory, I guess. It was pretty much the first one again, quality-wise. Again, I can respect the target audience, but I still wouldn't call this a good movie. All the cast are back, including James Corden, so it makes sense why it's a bit shit. The animation is completely fine, to be fair, and it's not the most hard to sit through film on this list. I think it says a lot that I'm struggling to remember anything significant about this movie. But if you like the first one, I guess you'll like this one fine. I still find the movies very annoying though. This movie removes James Corden but adds Amy Schumer to the cast. Wow, that is an achievement of shitness. But again, I swear these troll films just blend into one another. Like, why is there 3 of them? At least it's a better franchise than The Boss Baby. Because in some ways I'd rather watch this shit again. Because at least I know it means just mindlessly staring at the screen for an hour and a half. We have some seriously forced puns in this film. And again, the butchering of a lot of pop songs. But again, I can see why people like these films. I just don't really like them.
27.
Over the Hedge. The film which isn't as bad as some people say. But on the other hand, it's not as good as people say either. This was the start of the Dreamworks shitposts. With Shark Tale, it did seem like they were actually trying to make a good movie, which is actually more embarrassing. But with this one, it seemed like they didn't even care about the story. The story is about as cookie cutter as it gets for animated films, and it's especially jarring when you've seen this shit done so many times. This movie is just Chicken Run again, but worse. It sets up the lie reveal near the start, and you know exactly what's going to happen. And it also has the misunderstanding subplot in this. Fucking hell, Dreamworks. You do know how to plan out your runtimes in the most annoying ways. The issues in general are with the main animals, like none of them are interesting at all. The whole shtick with Vern and RJ gets tiring really quickly, and this is because they're so incredibly one note and bland. They just hate each other until they don't. That's literally it. Hammy just burps really, and yeah, it's just baby humour. And it also copies Twitchy from Hoodwinked. And after that, I can barely remember the other characters. Oh yeah, you do have the skunk, which is just a Shrek ripoff. Her whole character arc is just Shrek. Come on Dreamworks, where is the pizzazz? The soundtrack is decent to be fair, and the thing that makes this movie better is the villains. Gladys and the Verminator are both entertaining on screen, and say things that are so out of pocket and bizarre that you can't help but laugh.
Just a little peck, a smooch like you're kissing your sister.
This is the worst Madagascar film. Genuinely it is. Also, I'm convinced that the makers of this film were on acid or something when they made this. That or they were absolutely trolling. The amount of fucked up jokes in this is ridiculous. I mean, off the bat the film is crazy with that plane scene. Who thought of that incest joke? Why is it in a kids movie?
You just want to kiss the ground. Just a little peck, a smooch like you're kissing your sister.
And the movie does have a few intentionally funny jokes to it, to be fair. But it's not as funny as some people say it is. I'd still argue that the other two still have enough humour in them. And at least the first one has a story, guys. There seems to be more of a reason for the first one to exist. And what does this one have, really? I far from hate this movie, but I'm not going to rewatch it anytime soon.
25.
How to Train Your Dragon 2 looks visually incredible. It could have been released in 2024 and I wouldn't have questioned it. This was released a year after Turbo. Wow. The lighting and textures are just amazing in this movie. Fair play Dreamworks, honestly. Saying that, I think this is a bad movie. I don't know what to say to you guys, but please don't murder me in the comments. The charm of the original is just completely gone here. Everyone is just way too confident in this movie. This shit feels like an Avengers film. Hiccup has become this wisecracking, almost perfect badass, which gets so annoying. His constant quips are just so unfunny. He's just become so unlikable. I get what they were trying to do to make him more confident compared to the first, but this is way too much. The side characters are also crushingly annoying. This is the Dreamworks formula all over, and thankfully the original lacked this annoyingness. The foul mother trope is also so nothing, man. I literally don't care. It's like they were struggling to make a plot for this sequel, so they just went with that. And the shit with Hiccup actually always having the dragon touch is so bullshit. It's actually offensively bad. It lessens the impact of the first movie and it's so unbelievable that it's funny. I couldn't believe that they were doing that shit, like just fuck off man. They try and make it out like he's the boy who lived. Like are you kidding me Dreamworks? The villain is also just so boring and all he does is scream, which again makes it so unintentionally funny. And in this movie they butcher the John Powell score. Great.
24. I want a baby.
Aren't Jack and Jill siblings? A baby? What the fuck were you thinking, Dreamworks? But anyway, Puss in Boots is a really underwhelming film. Don't kill me guys, I'm on about the first one. This one just seemed like a prototype or a first draft for the second movie. It's not that cringe and it does have its moments, but the overall package is just quite disappointing. I do like the villains of Jack and Jill, but they're just not fleshed out enough. They're almost forgotten towards the end. Talk about wasted potential for the characters. I could also not care less for Puss's mother. It just feels so forced to try and create some kind of emotion. It's just all a bit weak to be honest. But the main issue this movie has is the bloody egg. Humpty Dumpty weighs down the whole movie. He's not interesting at all. I don't care about him or this long ass backstory, or his relationship with Puss, or even the constant betrayals that this guy does. You ruin the film, man. Check out this movie if you're a die-hard Dreamworks fan. But other than that, just watch the second Puss in Boots movie.
23.
This film broke me, guys. Not that Monsters vs. Aliens is particularly bad, but more the fact that there's so many Dreamworks films. Holy shit, they really shit out these, don't they? And Monsters vs. Aliens really feels like a prototype to Megamind. Thematically, they're quite similar in a lot of ways. But yeah, this one is definitely worse. I like the 50s monster movie influence that this movie has, and the story itself is fine honestly. The opening is quite funny too, but overall the movie is kind of dull. It's not really boring like Shrek 3 or anything. I got about 5 good laughs the whole movie, but most of them are so cringy. Most of the shit with the president is borderline unwatchable, I'm being serious. And things like the DDR references remind me that it is a Dreamworks film. and not in a good way for that matter. I don't know, I didn't hate this one. It's alright, but I don't think I'll ever watch it again. Also, can you tell that this is a 3D movie? And by the way, is Ginormica's dad King Neptune?
Now, I want you to know that even though I'm about to give you away, I will always be here to take care of you.
22.
Another DDR joke, Dreamworks. Really?
I hereby award Mr. Peabody a presidential pardon. Me too. I've done worse.
Oh my god. Only Dreamworks would make that joke. Mr. Peabody and Sherman is an okay film, and I do get what they were trying to do with this one. And it's perfectly watchable, but I really didn't give a shit about it. The movie itself looks fine and the performances are fine, but that's about it. It wasn't really that funny, and Mr. Peabody gets quite annoying at points. Ken from B-Movie is in this though, so that's a massive bonus.
Why is yogurt night so difficult?
21.
Wow. Talk about wasted potential. I was really excited for The Bad Guys. It has a good cast, for the most part, a really good art style, and I even like the opening scene at the diner with the long take. It was clear to me that they took the inspiration from Tarantino, in particular Pulp Fiction. This movie had all the ingredients to be great. It's not a bad movie, but it is one of the most predictable animated films I've ever seen. For a film that could have been so clever and subversive, it really lacks in the script. From the second you see the wolf start to like being good at the start, you can predict every character arc in the second act breakup, and even how the movie's going to end. And the movie itself is really not funny. I'm sorry guys, I might have got a weak smile here and there, but man, it's no Last Wish, is it?
20.
Well, this was disappointing. The Prince of Egypt is the most overrated film in Dreamworks' catalogue. Please don't kill me guys, I have my reasons. The best part of this film is that there are loads of beautiful shots. There are also a few cool sequences, and I also respect that this film doesn't pull its punches and show some dark moments. And that's kind of where my praise for the film ends. The animation is fine, but some of the CGI blending just isn't done well, to be honest. And I can tell you what I think the biggest issue with this film is, and it's just that it's too short. The film is 1 hour and 40 minutes, and in my opinion the characters just don't get fleshed out enough. I already know the story, and the depiction of the characters in this is just okay. And when it got to the supposed big emotional moments, I wasn't feeling much at all. It didn't feel earned. So the characters range from mid to annoying. Like, these side villain characters are pretty insufferable, and they have a terrible song in this film. Speaking of the music, apart from Deliver Us, I was quite underwhelmed, to be honest. None of the other songs really stick out to me, but the soundtrack itself is pretty good, to be fair. But is this really the film that people think rivals The Lion King? I don't think so, guys.
Orion, 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 Orion.
Orion in the Dark may be the most forgettable Dreamworks film for me. It's sad to say, but I really think they need to try a bit harder, especially after Puss in Boots. The film is written by Charlie Kaufman, who is a fantastic screenwriter in Hollywood, and he's written so many great films, but I think it was wasted talent here. I'm sure he could have done something better than this. The movie's animation doesn't look horrible, but it is very cheap looking. The movie could have looked amazing if they had a bigger budget. It's almost an insult to look at this after their other movies. When I was watching it, the dream characters just reminded me of Inside Out and Rise of the Guardians. Two movies which I don't think are amazing, but at least they had something more to them than this. I just don't think this film is that interesting, nor is it very well executed. And sadly, I wouldn't really want to watch this ever again. Like, I'd watched it like Shark Tale again for the meme. But Orion isn't good or funny bad, it's just complete middle of the road.
18.
I loved the Captain Underpants books as a kid. No idea how good they are now though, I haven't read them in years. And the film itself is perfectly fine, to be fair. I like the art style and the different uses of animation, and I do think it's very well paced. I'm not too sure about the casting though. Like, the kids are voiced by like 40-year-olds. I think that was intentional though, and I did get used to it pretty quickly. I did get 2 or 3 laughs, but the movie itself is a bit of a shame on the whole. The plot itself is fine, there is no Lara reveal shit or anything like that, but I just wish it was a bit funnier. This easily had the potential of being one of the great animated films. I really wish that this got a sequel and not Boss Baby.
17.
This is extremely controversial, but for my money, Sinbad is the best 2D animated Dreamworks film. It's the one I enjoyed the most for sure. It's the one that feels like the most cohesive movie. It may not be the best looking, but I think the story and characters are overall fine, and I had an okay time watching it. It's still no masterpiece and the CGI parts still look terrible, but I'm just beating a dead horse at this point. This is truly an average watch. But if this film had more humour or had a slightly more interesting narrative, this could have honestly been a truly great Dreamworks film. And to be fair, parts of the 2D animation look fantastic, like on Ares, and particularly the shots near the end. The lighting and backgrounds look so good honestly. But after all the other 2D films, I'm glad that it ended on a higher note. And it's a shame that this is the one that almost bankrupted them as a company. It seems like they just figured out how to make a good 2D animated film.
16!
Who put that Madagascar there? Madagascar is an average animated film, but it's definitely one of the better mid-2000s animated kids films. I like the character designs, but I'd be lying if I said the animation itself was great. I think the issue was that they were trying to rush out this movie. This is because they were apparently trying to beat the release date of The Wild. Yeah, it's a no-brainer I prefer this film. The characters are more memorable, the jokes are set up better, and the film doesn't fucking scare me like The Wild does. That being said, there are a few issues that stop this from being a solid animated movie. The film's narrative is very confused on who to focus on. The film starts with Marty seemingly being the protagonist, with wanting to go into the wild. But it changes into a frankly weird subplot with Alex trying to not eat his friends. In general, the first half of this movie is much better than the second half. I found the humour funnier, and I also thought the slapstick was particularly strong. It's not an animated film that I'll return to soon, but it's completely fine.
15.
Rise of the Guardians is alright. Yeah, this one is quite middle of the road to be honest. It's quite creative, and I do enjoy the characters well enough. But the villain is a bit shit. I don't really know what else to say to be honest. I can see why it bombed so hard for Dreamworks. It feels less like their normal output and more similar to a Disney film. I could see Disney doing this one better to be honest. And also, Alec Baldwin did a better job in This Is Santa than in Boss Baby to be fair. And at least I wasn't really bored in this film. And give this one a chance if you've never seen it because I know it has its fans. But for my money, it's a completely average animated kids film with some cool visuals and creativity.
Jack Black as a panda.
The third Kung Fu Panda is okay. It's easily the weakest one for me though. It feels like a step backwards from the second movie. The second movie had great world building and it felt like it was upping the ante. I thought this movie would be Poe going on a big quest to find his dad, but no, he just shows up straight away because Bryan Cranston, I guess? There's a lot of scenes that are similar to the first and it kind of feels like they're going through the motions a bit. And it's perfectly passable I guess, but I expected a lot more from a Kung Fu Panda sequel to be honest. And I like the villain and the soundtrack is great. And also the animation does look incredibly good. There's also a lot of really cool visuals in this film. So I do like it, but man, for what it could have been, it's kind of disappointing.
13.
Chicken Run is a decent attempt at a kids film from Dreamworks, especially considering in my opinion their rocky start as an animation company. It has memorable characters, great animation, and a good soundtrack. I would definitely pinpoint the reason on why this film's good. It's because of Aardman's involvement. Their signature wit and creativity prevails in this film. Chicken Run also has its fair share of laughs. Nothing amazing or anything, but the jokes are constant, and the humour does land. What puts this film down for me is I guess the villain's motivation for money, which is kind of bland, but at least Mrs. Tweedy is a fun character to watch. And the other thing that puts this movie down is the Lyra Ville subplot. This bogs down the entire movie. It's the main part of the story, and is established so early on. If this had a solid script, it could have genuinely been higher on the list, but as it stands, I like the movie, and I would happily watch it again.
Not even Wensleydale?
The Curse of the Were-Rabbit is a very enjoyable Dreamworks film, and of course this is thanks to Aardman. They just add so much charm to all their movies which I can really appreciate. I can also appreciate just how much time and effort it takes to make a film like this. It's all good stuff. The soundtrack by Julian Knott in general is absolutely fantastic, and it's probably one of Dreamworks' best. It also probably helped that it was produced by Hans Zimmer. Ralph Fiennes is great at playing villains, and his performance as Lord Victor Quatermain is one of the highlights of the movie. He's very memorable and is responsible for a lot of the film's humour. However, this is not a truly great animated film in my opinion. The film suffers from pacing issues, and isn't really engaging until the last 20 minutes or so. The climax in this film is honestly really entertaining and funny, and it does seem like Aardman put most of their effort into the final battle. The film also has the misunderstanding and lie reveal subplots. Jesus Christ. But it's practically glossed over thankfully, and isn't overbearing like it is in Chicken Run. It's also to note that after test screenings, the speech in this movie was changed for American audiences, and I did kind of notice that in this film, and sadly it felt more commercialised compared to your typical Aardman film. I do definitely recommend it though, and I'd happily watch it again soon.
Shrek.
I feel like I owe Shrek Forever After a bit of an apology. It's actually kind of alright. Like many other people say, the biggest issue is the first 20 minutes of the movie. The opening of the movie is frankly embarrassingly bad, to be honest with you. The conflict feels so forced and pointless. The premise almost seems like a joke. The question of, what if Shrek had a midlife crisis, seems more fitting as a meme than an actual movie. And this makes the conflict seem so incredibly forced that it's just terrible. And Shrek is just so unlikable because of how forced that shit is at the start. And it does make it a bit hard to root for him, to be honest. I thought the whole movie was going to suck after the opening. But to be fair, most of the movie is quite fun. Rumpel is a way better villain than this clown. And there's quite a bit of decent humour and set pieces sprinkled throughout. At least it's not boring like the third movie. So to be fair, I finished this movie relatively hate-free. Wait, why didn't they just swim to New York? Jada Pinkett Smith references Tupac. I feel so sorry for Will. Also, Skipper says Baba Booey. What is going on in this film? Anyway, can we all agree that this is definitely the best Madagascar film? It's just so much fun the whole way through. It's a really fun time and is visually stunning at points, and it's also incredibly well paced. It has a ton of jokes, and even if some of them don't work, there's always 5 more that will make you laugh afterwards. I swear there are so many out of pocket lines and moments in this one, and I really respect it. It does feel like they knew that this was probably going to be the last movie in the franchise, so I'm so glad they went all out. I'm also impressed of how many characters they juggle in this movie. It seems like everyone got the perfect amount of screen time, and I even like the new characters. I'm glad Heisenberg is in this movie as well. Dubois is also a ton of fun and she's animated so well. It results in a lot of great set pieces, honestly. The only thing bringing this down is the liar reveal shit. It didn't even matter that they lied about being circus animals. They literally saved your whole show, guys. Be thankful, Jesus Christ. Wow. This was genuinely incredible to watch. I'd watch this again purely for the visuals. Maybe Toy Story 4 looks better in some ways, but the way they blended the realism of the backgrounds with the cartoony art style in this is just perfect. Toy Story 4 looks kind of too realistic with the characters where it gets a bit uncanny at times. But anyway, I really wish I saw this film in IMAX. The movie itself is okay. It's way better than the second at least. The side characters are less annoying, and Hiccup is way more likeable in this. The story too is fine and it's way less cliche than the second movie, but it's nothing special to be honest. There's a lot of exposition dumps and moments where conflict could have been easily resolved, but hey, it's not the end of the world. The villain is a bit shit again, but the other characters were so fun to watch that it didn't matter too much, to be honest. Overall, I really enjoyed the movie and I would happily watch it again, albeit if that's just for the visuals.
Hello, loyal viewers.
Well, this one might get a bit of hate, but Megamind kind of disappointed me this time around. I still overall like it, but it's not a subversive masterpiece or anything. What this movie does really well is the voice cast and the soundtrack, and Will Ferrell is particularly great as Megamind. This and the movie not having tone-deaf jokes like a lot of Dreamworks films do result in a fun watch. The story itself is for the most part quite unique. You know, they actually had an idea for this movie. It wasn't another Shark Tale, thank God. But the film isn't laugh out loud funny for the most part in my opinion. And the second act does drag a bit, especially with the second act low point cliches. They honestly should have just reworked some of that stuff. But the opening is great and the climax is a lot of fun. Also, they did my boy Jonah Hill so dirty in this movie.
Kung Fu Panda.
Kung Fu Panda 2 was just as good as I remembered it. While not being as funny as the first one, it still has great animation, a really cool villain, and another fantastic score. I think the reason I prefer the first is because of the relationship between Po and Master Shifu, and Shifu is sadly sidelined in the later films. But for what it's worth, this movie is an incredibly well-paced fun time. For the record, I'm glad it's another Dreamworks film that lacks their normal cliches. It was a very refreshing watch to say the least.
Croods, who are you people?
This is the big shocker. All odds were against this movie. This is probably the most slept on Dreamworks film of all time. And it's honestly an underrated gem. Croods: A New Age is genuinely a really good animated film. I'm just as shocked as you guys, but it makes sense when you realise that the director is the same guy who did The Last Wish, and the people who wrote this also did the Lego movie. But yeah, this movie is just so fun, guys. They took a turd movie into something incredibly enjoyable. I'm just so glad they put so much effort into this. The animation and the colours work off each other really well, and it's also funny and has an interesting story, and it manages to juggle so many characters and they're also likeable, and way more likeable than they were in the first. This movie also doesn't have any of the bullshit cliches that a lot of these animated films do. I was waiting on the Bettermans to be secretly evil or there to be a misunderstanding, but the conflict is done really well because you can understand all of the characters' frustrations with each other. This movie is also consistently funny too. A lot of it is less about the jokes and more about the absurd situations they get in, and it's just done so well. And I know I've said this before, but it shows that I don't hate on these films just for the sake of it. I don't care what anyone else says, but I think Croods: A New Age is one of the best Dreamworks films. When effort is put into these movies, they can turn out so good. I'm convinced that this team could have made Boss Baby good. I'm not joking, because it's kind of shocking that they actually made this a good film. That is a crazy feat.
5.
You guys don't understand how relieved I was when I got to this movie. I was getting pretty sick of Dreamworks, especially after watching quite a few crap ones. How to Train Your Dragon was a Dreamworks film that I always liked, but never really loved that much. And I don't know what it was, but I really enjoyed it this time around. I think it's because it lacks a lot of the Dreamworks formula. Finally, a film that wasn't trying to be Shrek again, and no annoying celebrity voice cast and pop culture references. But yeah, How to Train Your Dragon is an incredibly well-paced animated film that has some cliches, but its execution and likability is so good that it doesn't really matter. But anyway, the flying scenes look incredible. I never appreciated just how visually stunning they are. The cinematography makes you really feel the weight of it all. And man, the best part of this was the score. John Powell deserved all the praise for this one, and I think it's one of the best animated scores of all time. The only thing I didn't love was the third act battle. It got a bit too generic for my liking. But other than that, it's a movie that I'll be coming back to time and time again.
Puss in Boots.
Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is a great animated film. I'm so glad to say that. It's well paced, has likeable characters, and has a really clever deep message for a Dreamworks film. The message is about accepting death and embracing the one life you have, and it's presented so brilliantly through the villain of death itself. And this results in some fantastic character drama with Puss in Boots. He was always the cocky side character, but making him genuinely scared in this movie works so well because of how he manages to deal with it. Including the dog side character, which could have been so pointless in a lesser movie, is actually warranted because it helps with the central conflict. The movie isn't all dreary though, as the other villain perfectly balances the drama with comedy. Jack Horner is one of my favourite Dreamworks villains. He's just so funny and ruthless and always says the most out-of-pocket shit. And this movie is not afraid to straight up kill people. And it makes the comedy moments so much funnier. And it also adds stakes to the drama. The movie is also very funny, but I respect how there are many serious scenes that let the film breathe. It's a perfect balance, honestly. And the way the movie manages to juggle all these characters is amazing. Even Goldilocks and the Three Bears have a good story arc to them. And this probably has the best Lyra reveal plot I've seen in a Dreamworks film. You can do them, guys. They can work if the people behind it actually give a shit about the movie. The film builds up to a fantastic third act battle, and I think the movie itself pays homage to the good, the bad and the ugly. It's great, honestly, and so fitting for a Puss in Boots film. Look, if you somehow haven't, watch this film as soon as you can. It's so great.
Shrek.
The film that single-handedly carried Dreamworks on its back all these years. Shrek is one of those very rare animated films that its influence changed the whole industry. Every animated film after this tried to replicate the lightning in the bottle idea that Shrek is, and to be honest, not many succeeded after it. You just have to remember the time when Shrek came out. People were so used to squeaky clean Disney films with standard protagonists and dance numbers. So for a film like Shrek to come along and just say fuck all of that, is just marvellous. Like guys, the intro is so iconic because you think it's another standard fairy tale affair. But then no, Shrek literally uses the page in the book to wipe his ass. Then instead of a musical number, it starts off with a pop song, which is a fantastic subversion. And any attempt of a musical number in this film is absolutely shut down, like it's the worst idea in the world. I absolutely love it. I also love the Disneyland ripoff of Duloc, and the villain Lord Farquaad is based on the former Disney CEO Michael Eisner, and Farquaad sounds very similar to some other phrase. What more can I say? The characters are great, the story is refreshing and subversive, the comedy really hits throughout, and the score is fantastic. So fantastic that it became the song for Dreamworks themselves. And on a personal note, I love Mike Myers, and this is probably his best ever performance. The animation also holds up surprisingly well for a film made in 2001. It is a bit dated, but what can you do? The only thing I don't really like in this film is the misunderstanding subplot, but thank God it doesn't last that long.
Jack Black as Jack Black.
Kung Fu Panda is one of those miracle movies from Dreamworks. Like back in the day, how could you figure out what movie would be better? A movie starring Jack Black called bloody Kung Fu Panda, or B-movie starring Jerry Seinfeld. And for a movie from 2008, the animation holds up very well. The score by John Powell is also incredible. So the foundations for the film are great, and thankfully everything else works here too. We have Poe as the protagonist, and he could have easily been a copy of Shrek, but he isn't. He's way more optimistic out of the gate, and his hero's journey is executed better in some ways compared to the first Shrek. The movie brilliantly skips over so many animated cliches. There's no misunderstanding or lie reveal subplot, and that results in the conflict being so genuinely earned in this movie. I think this movie works so well because of the focus of Poe and Shifu's relationship. Both are so funny to watch and bounce off each other really well, and their actual backstories make the conflict understandable. Tai Lung is obviously a great Dreamworks villain and steals the show for a lot of the fight sequences. Kung Fu Panda has easily stood the test of time. It's one of the best Dreamworks films and is an animated classic.
Shrek 2?
After watching it again, I think I have to admit that Shrek 2 is better than the first, and I never thought I would say that. Shrek 2 had to follow up one of the most influential animated films of all time, and they could have so easily cashed out. But luckily Dreamworks didn't, and in turn we got one of the funniest, best paced animated films I've ever seen. This movie works on almost every level. The story is great, the animation holds up really well, the characters are fun, and the new ones they add in are great too. The pacing is incredible, and there is not one dull moment in the whole thing. And I love the villains too. Prince Charming and the Fairy Godmother are both really interesting characters, and they bounce off each other incredibly well. The only minor nitpick I have is the misunderstanding subplot, but it's paced incredibly well, and is full of witty humour, so I can't complain that much. The references really work in this movie too, with Far Far Away being a parody of Hollywood, and this in turn makes the dance number work again. What more can I say about one of the best animated films of all time? What a film, man, and I really wish they stopped after this one. Wow, that was long. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I hope you enjoyed this list. It was a huge undertaking for me. My biggest takeaway from this video is that all the animated film cliches can be done well under the right hands, and also that Dreamworks release way too many shit films. Holy shit. Some of these movies are atrocious, but I guess it makes their great films more special. Dreamworks has always been the oddball animated studio, so even if their content may not always be the best, it's always interesting to see what they release because of their varying output quality. Thanks for watching, guys.
It's junk. First class junk.